and what a great day to sew something wonderful. I'm Kea with Kea Bee, and I'm so excited to be back with you today for another long-awaited quilting tutorial. We are going to be looking into our beginner quilter series this week, and we're going to be learning how to make a flying geese. And flying geese can sometimes be intimidating if you're writing a pattern, but I'm going to show you how to walk through it, and it's going to be really simple and awesome. So why don't you come in a little closer? We'll talk about some of the materials that are necessary for making a flying geese, and I'll show you some really fun things like how to take this block and make it really simple with flying geese. You might remember this from a tutorial we did over Christmas break. And so I'll teach you how to make these two parts here from half square triangles into a flying geese instead. Or even we talked about, turning your blocks on point. And so this might be, if you don't want to turn your block on point, I'll show you how to take an existing quilt block, turn it into a flying geese, and use it in a different way. So why don't you come in a little closer? Materials that you're going to need for today's project are a rotary cutter and whatever size ruler that you have handy. You will need some scrap fabric. So I've just picked out 3 scraps from my scrap pile. And pretty importantly, you are going to need some type of fabric marking tool. So I have several here for you. This one is a friction pin. There is some controversy about this pin. And so I use it. I really like it. I have not had any of the issues that people are saying they have with these. So this is just one that I use. It is heat erase. So as soon as I put it under my iron, there's no issues, it just goes right away. This is just a pencil I've picked up at an Amish store, and so I find that really interesting to use, especially on really dark fabrics like a black linen, or when I was doing Norm and Nanette, this came in really handy. This is a Friction Colors erasable marker, and so this is again heat erase, and it is a marker. I really enjoy this one. And then this is a Friction erasable pen, just in a different kind of point there. So I've got some options there for you, and those are really important for when we go to make our flying geese. Then the last thing you're going to need besides your sewing machine and thread is just a pair of snips. These are Tim Holtz snips that we got a few months ago in the Sew Sampler box, and so we will definitely need these. Okay, so the very first thing that you'll need to do is kind of pick 2 of your scrap fabrics. So I've picked this one and this blue so that it's a nice contrast. And I would cut just a random rectangle out of your fabric. So I've cut this one at 2.5 by 5 inches for our example. And now what? This is the math that you need to do to figure out the flying geese shape. So if this is 2.5 here by 5 inches, I need to add an inch to my length. So 6 inches, and we need to make 2 sides to our flying geese. So that 6 inches divided by 2 is 3. Another way to look at it would be to, you have 5 inches as your length, and cut that in half would be 2.5 inches, and add a 1/2 inch to each square, and that would be 3 inches. So we need 2 3-inch squares to make this a proper flying geese. And so out of your secondary fabric, or background typically is what that is, you're going to need to cut, so I've just lined this up on my ruler, I'm going to cut 2 3-inch squares. I'm going to line this up on my rectangle just to make sure they overlap by 1 inch. And that's going to give us that perfect middle. So I just line that up and make sure right here they're overlapped by 1 inch, and these are. So we're actually done working with our rectangle for just a moment. So again, let me just explain that really quickly. We're at 2.5 by 5, and I need to add 1 inch of room so that I have plenty of room up here at my flying geese. And so I'm going to do 6 inches, and we need 2 pieces of that, so that's 3-inch squares. I'm going to set that up here to the side. Now on the wrong side of our 3-inch squares, we're going to take whatever marking tool you've decided to use. I'm going to use this red marker so that it's really bright for you to see. And from corner to corner of our 3-inch square, we're just going to draw a line. Now be careful not to pull your pin across the fabric. Very lightly color as it is on the bias, and so you can stretch it. So I've got that one, and now this one. Make sure your fabric is nice and pressed at this point. This will really help in that, in this next step. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to just finger press ever so gently in half, right on that line. And bring my rectangle over and make sure, yes, so that's gonna fit very nicely. I'm gonna do the same for this one. So this is just kind of a loose fitting to make sure I've got all the right measurements. And we're gonna go on this side, and you see we're overlapping a 1/2 inch here, which is great. That means we don't ever want to lose the point to our flying geese when we sew our blocks into sashing or our blocks to each other. So this is going to give us a 1/2 inch of leeway. That's a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we're about a 1/4 inch away from that point. So we should never really ever lose it as long as we're staying at our 1/4 inch seam. Now don't worry about this excess here at the bottom. We're going to cut that off. So our next step is to take this off, and we're going to choose one side. And we are going to line this up, wrong sides together. We're going to sew right directly on the line that we've drawn. I would use a very small stitch length and just sew right straight down that line. Okay, so right off, that's no problem. Now I'm going to take this and I am going to finger press this, just like that. And so that's one side of our flying geese. We should basically have the exact same triangle going all the way down with just the diagonal seam there. Now here's where your scissors come in handy. I would cut this off, but before we do that, you can make so many projects out of this excess triangle here because it's going to make a 1/2 square triangle if you go a 1/2 inch away from this seam. So I'm going to take the extra second and sew a 1/2 inch away from this original stitch line, and I'm going to throw that in my scrap bin and use that as a project later on down the road. So now I can take my Tim Holtz snips and just cut right in between those and use that for a project later on. So now I'm going to go back and finger press this open. I'm not pressing with heat yet because I really want to be so gentle with that bias. And I'm going to lay my other square right on top, wrong sides together again. And I'm going to sew from corner to corner on the line that I've already drawn. Okay, snip this off. Oh, I lost my thread, so I didn't even, I lost my thread, so I didn't even get this sewn together. That's okay. Okay, so now I can open this and finger press this open. And look at that, flying geese. Now I'll take this over to the iron, give this a really good press, and even add some starch to it. Okay, there we go. Now the next thing we want to do is trim this back to be 2.5 inches. So I will lay down my ruler. I'm actually going to straighten up this edge. If you've gotten a tad bit off, that's okay. Just straighten up that edge again. So I just kind of got a tad bit off right there in the corner. I mean a sliver. Trim that right off. And now flip this over and put that at the 2.5 inch mark on my ruler. Just like that, and snip off these little ears I've got. And I have the perfect 2.5 by 5 inch flying geese. So I'll let you watch me make just a couple of more. Okay, so now we have all 4 of our star points made. You can do just like this. There we go. And your center block is going to be the exact same length as your rectangles. So we would need a 5-inch square to go right here in the center, and then some little 2.5-inch little cornerstones right here that would complete your block. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab another piece of fabric. I'm going to cut that out really quick and show you that. So again, 5 inches, I just got that from the length of the rectangle we chose, and we chose a 5-inch rectangle by 2.5. So we'll need a 5-inch square, and then we'll need 4 2.5-inch squares, which was the width of our rectangle. Let me also add a disclaimer as I'm laying this out. It is always best practice to press your fabric before you cut it. I just got in a hurry and did not do that. So our star points are actually going to go towards the center. So our flying geese is going to go towards the center. We're going to do these here, just like this. And then our little cornerstones go here. And there's our star. So you've made 4 flying geese with 5 just square pieces of fabric, and it turns into this wonderful star. So let's talk about customizations that you can do with your flying geese if you're pattern writing. So we made ours 5 inches by 2.5, but let's say you want to make yours 7 inches by 4. So what you would do, you would need to cut your flying geese square, so these bits here. If our rectangle was 7 inches by 4-inch width, we would need these to be 4 inches apiece, equaling 8 inches. That's going to give us this half an inch point here that won't let us lose our points as we're putting the block together. And then you would trim down to 4 inches again. Let's say you had a 10-inch width. Each of these would need to be 5.5, equaling 11 inches width. So these would need to be 5.5-inch squares. Flying geese can be so simple when you really break it down into little, just little math like that. So I can't wait to see what blocks you come up with. And this doesn't have to be the only formation of a flying geese. So we've got this one layout, but let's say maybe you just want to put 2 together. And you've got kind of an hourglass. You can flip them around and you've got an on-point square there. You can make a rectangle. So you could just have these as the rectangle block. You could put your other 4 on the side using the same, and that makes a really cute block. And then you use your cornerstones again, just like this. Flying geese are so versatile and you can do so many different things with it. So that looks like a completely different block than just turning them before. You can also put these together. I'm working on a quilt pattern right now that makes 3 of these with a, see if I can just kind of finger press this really quick. And it kind of makes that a tree. So you've got your stump and then your 3 points to your tree. So it's really super versatile. You can make them in all different sizes. And let me know if you have questions down below or you need kind of help figuring out specific sizes. Thank you so much for joining us in the Hive today for this really quick and easy flying geese tutorial. If you're wanting to maybe dabble into a little pattern writing, these short little beginner Quilters Series videos will really be helpful in kind of keeping that at the forefront of your mind. Well, thank you again so much for joining us in the Hive today. Please let me know if you have any questions or need further explanations down in the comments. We love to continue the conversation down there. So again, thank you and have a great day.